Hey, what's up, you guys? My name is Grace Lauren Taylor, and you are listening to episode 6 of the Trauma Dump Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. Here at the Trauma Dump Podcast, we seek to answer the question, what is mental health? How do I take care of my own, and how do I support others? This week, we will be discussing the topic of sexual abuse, sexual assault, and other SA topics. Viewer discretion is definitely advised in this episode. Our guest this week is a huge sensation on TikTok, amassing over 100,000 followers. It's ItsJojoLouise. If you'd like to share on the show, please message us in our Discord in the podcast participants channel, along with your unique experiences, and we will match you to the right episode. Now, this interview is recorded in Zoom, so I apologize if the audio or the video quality is not up to par with our normal episodes. I'm still getting started on this podcast, and so we got to figure some things out. So there will be a few bumps along the road, but hey, thank you so much for sticking along with us. It really means a lot to me. If you or someone you love is experiencing sexual abuse, we have a lot of resources. Sexual Assault Hotline from RAINN, that is RAINN, is 1-800-656-4673. Please contact them if you are in need of any help. The hotline is open to call or text 24/7. Again, the number is 1-800-656-4673. Sexual abuse is any sexual activity that occurs without consent. It's also referred to as sexual assault or sexual violence. It includes unwanted sexual touching, forced oral sex, and rape, among other sexual acts. No matter which act occurs, it is not the survivor's fault that they were assaulted. Help is always available to begin healing from these forms of abuse. All right, let's get into it. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If you do, please like, comment, and share. We'll see you guys later.
All right. Beautiful. Hello. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Oh my goodness. I'm so happy to have a guest who is kind of famous.
Fun. It's rare that I get called famous. So that's exciting.
You're famous in my eyes. I actually found you on TikTok way before I asked you to come for an interview. And I watched some of your TikToks. I was intrigued. I was like, oh, this person seems so cool. And I instantly followed. So yeah.
I'm so honored. Thank you.
Of course. So introduce yourself to our guests.
Yeah, do you just want to know like name, pronouns, stuff like that?
Yes. Your name, your pronouns, what you go by, how you want to be addressed in the comments.
Yeah, so I'm JojoLouise. You can call me Jojo, Jordy, Johnson. I go by like all sorts of weird nicknames, but Jojo's the most common. I'm 22 years old and I use they them pronouns. So yeah, just refer to me with those pronouns.
Amazing. Very, very cool. So this episode, we're going to be talking about sexual abuse, sexual assaults, all forms of SA, and going to be discussing your story and the stuff that you've been through. And just a disclosure, I'm not a licensed health professional. I'm just a person who's been through trauma, trying to make a platform for those of us who have gone through trauma to talk about it without feeling judged or ridiculed for the things that we've gone through. So I'm very happy to have you on and to be able to talk to you about it. So just to be sure you're comfortable with discussing what has happened to you, right?
Yeah, I'm a big advocate for being able to safely and comfortably talk about trauma. Destigmatizing is a huge thing, in a healthy manner, obviously, without making it other people's problems. But I'm fully prepared to talk about things and feeling okay about it.
Awesome. I'm so sorry. Gigi is barking. Gigi, come here. I think we have a package being delivered. So she's like, oh my gosh, there's someone here.
Is it a dog? I'm assuming.
Yes, Gigi is my service dog. I have
Oh,
seizures. So she alerts me when they happen. And she also alerts me when there's someone at the door, like a normal dog.
what a sweet
So,
angel.
yes, she's multitasking. So to make sure I'm not crossing any boundaries and respecting your experiences, please feel free to interrupt me if you ever feel uncomfortable or triggered. We can take a break at any time. And if you don't feel like answering a question, you don't have to. It will not hurt my feelings, okay?
Of course. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, I just want to make sure you feel safe at all times. So according to the CDC, 1 in 4 men and 1 in 3 women report having experienced physical sexual violence. These numbers are likely lower than the actual number of victims out there because sexual abuse is extremely underreported. Have you experienced sexual assault or sexual abuse?
Yeah, I've experienced it with 5 different people now.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it's a rough one.
It is. I'm so sorry. That it's that's such a big number that it's like, oh my God. I've
Yeah,
also experienced some, but it was only with one person. But still, 5 people.
well,
Oh
one
my
person
goodness.
doesn't diminish it. It's still
Yeah.
it's rough no matter how many times you go through it, who it's with. And like, yeah, you think about it 5 times with one person, you can't imagine what other
Mm-hmm.
people are going through.
Mm-hmm.
But
So out of those 5 times, let me ask you this question. What type of sexual abuse, because there's many different types. There's the physical type that everybody knows about. There's verbal sexual abuse that includes words to express or evoke or imply sexual content. There's visual sexual abuse, being sent pornographic images without your consent. There's also like covert sexual abuse that happens without your knowledge when people are observing you and doing things without you knowing about them. And there's also ritualistic sexual abuse, which is like a blending of sexuality and ritualizing it. It's really common in cults, and it's something I've actually experienced. It's very traumatizing. But out of those, do you resonate with any of them?
yeah, well, if you're, I mean, talking about the first 2, verbal and like pictures and being viewed without your consent, I've experienced all of that countless times. I mean, my nudes went around my high school. I've been catcalled and sent dick pics and all sorts of things. I've been, tons of unsolicited nudes and stuff like that. So countless times. But the 5 times that I was mentioning, I was raped by 5 different people, full on. Just yeah.
Oh my goodness.
I've been filmed without my consent. I've been, yeah, it's weird. It's almost normalized now, like getting dick pics without consent and stuff like that. Like, I feel like it's almost normal to me because of how many times it's happened. And it's been happening to me since I was, pubescent, since the moment I got my hands on a phone. And also, like, I think every other femme presenting person I know also has been experiencing, verbal and digital sexual assault since the moment we had phones in our hands.
Yeah, it's incredibly common with, the internet. I remember the first time I got a cell phone, which was very much against my dad's will, but my mom's like, I need to be able to contact my daughter, right? And I was not allowed to download Instagram, but I downloaded it secretly. And immediately, like the onslaught, I was like 14 years old, the onslaught of just harassment, it scared me as a child. I was like, now I know why I should not have this. And
oh
my
I
goodness.
mean, we're the first generation to really go through this like technological advancement, and so we are like the guinea pigs for all of this stuff. So we grew up without this regulation, and I mean, like, I got my first phone when I was 15 and was introduced to like Kik and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And the amount of like older men who took advantage of me through Kik, and then just also in my hometown, Facebook Messenger, I have messages going back from when I was 15, 16 of, men in their mid 20s uh, sending me explicit images. I mean, I had a friend in high school literally try to sell my body, sell my virginity to someone for drugs. Like, it was, yeah, it's what the internet can do, and the way that we message each other now can play a huge part in it, especially for younger people who don't understand the repercussions, who don't understand things like digital. I was never taught about digital footprint, so you know, my body was just out there for the world. I was never taught about how to keep myself safe on the internet. It was just free reign.
Yeah, internet safety is a really big thing nowadays. I mean, especially, I started this podcast over a year ago, but I was unable to post due to legal reasons. But I had the Discord up and running, and we have a lot of people in that Discord, and a lot of them are underage. And them talking about, how do I deal with this thing? And, oh, this girl that I like just kissed me suddenly, and I didn't want that to happen, but it's a girl that I like. And like, all these kids are asking, me and other people on the Discord for advice. And I'm glad that they're asking, I'm glad that they're talking about it, but it rocks my world every time whenever these young people are discussing so much trauma, and they don't even realize it. They don't even realize that this is like a horrible thing that's happening. It's just the norm nowadays. This is just normalized.
Yeah, when I first got to my university, it is a required course that we have to take to be students, and it's sexual assault prevention. And so it goes through this entire just online course. It takes about an hour that just talks about like consent in deep form, and it was everything, like, movies and books and stuff. It makes it to this it romanticizes like kissing people on a whim, and like pulling them in, and like dramatic and aggressive sex that you just like, it has to be all of a whirlwind romance, and it can't be good and if you ask. And so I feel like, when I had my first kiss and stuff, like, I didn't want the person to ask, because I was like, but then there was people like where I was like, well, if they didn't ask and they just kissed me, I would be really uncomfortable. And so I get to college and I'm like, oh, so it's normal to like ask to kiss someone, like, I ask before I hug somebody. I ask, I hesitate to even tap people on the shoulder, because I don't know how people like to be touched. I don't know, I have I have days where I can't be touched. I have days where if you touch me up, I have a panic attack. It's like, you never know. And so that became normalized to me, but it's awful that it took until college for me to learn about that. And even then, the courses don't do much. I mean, almost every time that I've been raped has been since I got to college. So, it depends.
That's horrifying. I went to Texas Tech University, and we also had to
I grew up in Texas.
Nice, amazing.
My dream college.
You went to Tech?
It was my dream college for years. I live in Washington now, so I go to school here, but I just moved to connection.
Yeah, I just graduated in December from Tech.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It was hard. This is a pandemic and everything, but I digress. We also had a course at Texas Tech, and I think it was when we were in freshman year, of consent. We also had a course of what to do if your drink has been spiked, like party do and don'ts, which, as little freshman Grace, I did not go to parties. I was a full-time theater major, so I was in the theater like all day long, 7 a.m.
I'm also a full-time theater major.
Nice. Yeah, I was in theater 7 a.m. till like sometimes 11 o'clock at night. So I never had any time for parties until I was in senior year. And I grew up in a very conservative Christian household. I didn't know about any of this stuff. And it was such a dramatic, like, what is happening, when I found out like some of my peers were getting sexually assaulted, and they were like, oh, it's no big deal. Just got sexually assaulted, but whatever. And I was just horrified. So I'm like, wait, what happened to you? What are you going through? What's happening? And they're just talking about it so nonchalantly. And I think that's so horrible. And it's just a thing there. Like Texas Tech culture, I hate to say it, it's very much a party school. And it's just a thing of like, they're like, okay, well, these are the things you can try to do to not get sexually assaulted. Like, let your friends know if you're going to a party, turn on your location for your friends, make sure you have a drinking buddy, but you also have like to have, what's it called, a D&D? Not a
A
D&D.
designated driver.
Yes, a designated driver. Yeah.
And we have like chaperones sometimes. Yeah, it's you have to be careful with that too, though. I mean, like I was taught all the party etiquette. I was taught to like never let somebody hold my drink unless I really trust them, and like make sure your drink is covered. Don't take drinks from strangers. But like I was drugged the second time I was raped. I was drugged, and it was at a date actually at his house, and it was just us. And you know, it was a first date. We were just hanging out together, and he handed me a drink, and I drank it, and like couldn't move suddenly. And so like, you know, they don't teach you about those kind of things either. I feel like I got to college, and especially, I mean, if you know how it is growing up in a Christian conservative household, you know, I didn't have in high school, I did not have access to drugs and drinking very much. You know, I'd smoked weed once, I'd been drunk maybe once, and it was alone in my room. Like I didn't know how to go about that. Nobody ever taught me. I was very sheltered. And so going somewhere the first time it happened was right before I left for college. And you know, I told the person I was with that I don't smoke, I don't use marijuana, I don't drink, and he insisted that we drink. And I told him before I even went over there, you know, I don't want to sleep with you, that's not what I'm about. And alas, you know, he got me super high, and I was barely even coherent. So like I feel like there are things that could be prevented with a lot more people learning about how to properly handle alcohol and drugs at a younger age, and like making sure that people know it's not just at parties. It's you have to be cautious at dates. You have to be cautious with your friends. Sometimes it happens in relationships. If you're dating somebody new, like you are allowed to say no, and it you can still be raped by your partner. Like, you know, there's a whole party etiquette, but there's also stuff outside of that too.
Definitely. Yeah, I do. That was when I like being
Raped by a partner. Yeah, I was in a long-term relationship with a guy, and I had never had sex before. I was initially trying to save myself till marriage, and he was like, no, we love each other, I'm like, yeah, but I don't wanna. And he did everything in his power and held me down and gave me huge bruises on the side of my neck, and I was just filled with so much shame and so much anger. And you know, I was going through a really traumatic time in my life because my dad had just been hit by a car, and my dad was my best friend. He was the only person I opened up to, and I didn't have my dad. My dad had a traumatic brain injury. I couldn't talk to my dad about it, and I broke up with the dude, but I went off the deep end, and I became really like overtly sexual, like had sex with anybody, everybody. It was somehow my way of coping. It was a very horrible way of coping, mind you, but it was what I did, because at that time I didn't drink alcohol. I think I was like 20. I didn't drink alcohol. I didn't do any drugs other than ones that were prescribed to me. Like, and I guess that was another way of my self-harm, was that, okay, my virtue has been tarnished. Fuck it. I'm going to like do whatever people want me to do, because I don't think it was ever something that I wanted to do. Do you resonate with anything like that?
Yeah, I definitely, and I mean, still to this day, experience hypersexuality because of rape, and honestly, just like a lot of trauma in general. But I think that probably something that contributes most strongly to that is being raped, because it feels like if I'm putting myself out there, if I'm the one that's hypersexual, if I'm the one that wants to have sex, then I'm in control. but you know, it's not always like that. I mean, the last time it happened, it was with somebody who I was very comfortable with, very safe with, and we were both drunk and we both wanted to have sex, but then things got out of hand because, you know, he was too drunk to watch his actions, and you know, he filmed me without my consent and stuff like that. And uh so, you know, there's still, it can still get you in rough situations, and unfortunately I'm coming to the realization that just because you both agree to sex, it doesn't mean that there aren't things that aren't consensual that can happen. You know, he still raped me in a different way. And there were things that happened, and it was a really hard conversation to have with him the next day too, to be like, you were really drunk and I was really drunk and I consented to having sex with you, but I did not consent to you shoving it in my ass. Like, you know, just like, it's just stuff like that. It was, you know, I consented to having sex with you, so I understand, but what you did was still rape, and like, I can't see you anymore. Because like, I mean, it was very different than any of the ones I'd experienced. I've experienced it with, twice with partners, and so you know, you had to go through the process. But I feel like that hypersexuality is a way. And also how you were talking earlier about your friends being completely nonchalant, like, yeah, I was just raped, I was just sexually assaulted. I went to work the next day and told my coworker about it. I was like, yeah, suddenly I was hearing myself moaning and I looked around and he was filming me, and then he just shoved it in. And I didn't even process what had happened until she just looked at me and she was like, oh my God, Joe, I'm so sorry. And then it hit me like bricks. Like I didn't even notice. My brain was like, I got laid last night because I'm a whore. Like, that's just like, I'm slutty and I like to fuck. And then I was like, oh shit, no, a close friend of mine just did that to me. I feel like that's sometimes just like our way of coping, is just not acknowledging it, not acknowledging that it happened, and just carrying on with our hypersexuality.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, part of it for me,
Me was that I was raised with purity culture, like big purity culture. And, you know, my dad is dead now, but when I was 14, he had the sex talk with me, told me that, you know, I should never have sex until I'm married because it's the one thing I have to give my husband. And then if I don't give it to my husband, I have nothing to give my husband. I love my dad so much, but that was such a convoluted, horrible thing to say, especially to your daughter, especially to a 14-year-old girl.
Yeah,
especially
is very damaging.
It's so damaging. And thinking back on it now, it's debilitating sometimes, because
teaching a kid that all you have to give is your body is, especially to young women, it's really damaging. But then it also, I mean, they're having the same, other parents with the same ideologies, they're having the same talk with their sons. Like, your wife owes you this if she's not pure. So it's not only raising women to think that they owe their male partners sex when they're married, but also teaching men to expect that that's what I get, that's my reward.
Yeah. It's really terrifying. It's really horrible because, you know, I have two younger brothers, and like you said, both of my brothers were raised that way, of thinking that, you know, for their future wives, like, they need to be virgins, they need to be in the church, they need to be devout. And, you know, thank God my youngest brother was like, that's BS.
Fuck that.
Yeah, he's I love him so much. But my middle brother, he really holds true to those beliefs. And I'm currently living with my partner. We've been living together almost 2 years. And he's the love of my life. I'm going to marry him one day. This is not going to be anytime soon because we got stuff to figure out. And my brother tells me all the time, he's like, you're living in sin. You're a sinner. He's just getting it for free. You guys are just horrible people. He's like, sometimes he's like, I can't even look at you. And it's so heartbreaking because, you know, granted, like, for some people, yeah, that's good for them. But in my own, like, experience, I've never felt more loved, more cherished than when I'm with my partner. I've never felt more seen, more respected than when we're intimate and he tells me he loves me. That for me, that's the highest form of intimacy. And he's healed so many parts of me because every single time he asks for consent, I've never had to have that talk with him. He's always like, can we do this? Can we do this? Or whenever he feels uncomfortable, he's like, hey, I don't feel comfortable with this. Like, we are the most safe together. And for my brother to constantly harass me about it, it's just so frustrating. Do you ever have any close friends or family that harass you about these types of things?
Thankfully, I choose, like, I do not surround myself. I can't. I like my biological father, who I love dearly, is conservative, evangelical, Christian, military, like Texan. We grew up in Weatherford, Texas, so tiny town outside of Dallas, and my dad very much holds to those traditional values. I do not talk to my dad about my sex life. I did talk to my dad about being raped, and thankfully, like, my dad and all of his flaws loves me. And so when I told him that I was raped, he was just like, oh my God, I didn't even know. Like, I could just like hear his heart breaking through the phone. But thankfully I have a very supportive system of people, and I don't have anybody who makes me feel like I'm less than for any of my experiences, consensual or not. I have a group of friends who, I'm the brunt of a lot of sex jokes, just in general at work, with my friends. It's all about jokes about my boobs or my ass or my sex life or the last partner I had, or, something like that. But it's never, it's never anything that's demeaning. It's always like, oh, this is funny. And when it's all jokes and laughs. Thankfully, I have very positive experiences with the people that I'm surrounded by. I can't imagine having to come home to a family member telling you that, and I'm really sorry, because that's ass.
Yeah, it's not great.
Great. And I know he'll be watching this episode because he watches everything I make. But I did my best to remove myself from them, I should say, because I have a very conservative Jamaican family. And just to ignore it because my therapist told me that you can't heal in a place that make you sick. So like, okay, that means I gotta cut out a lot of family members, and it's sad, but it has been so healing for me going forward with my life, of being like, wow, once I've removed those negative little chitter chatter boxes, I feel so much better about myself and so much better about the decisions that I've made for my life, and it's really helped.
Well, ultimately, it's a lot more freeing. I mean, being stuck in I've cut out countless family members for all sorts of things. I had family members who were very pro police during the riots and the George Floyd. I can't tolerate that. I can't tolerate racism. So cut out like that. And I had family members who were really hurt. They were like, wow, like, I made one post supporting the police and you're willing to cut me out. And I'm like, yes, because I'm not going to allow myself to continue to stay in a situation where people aren't supporting human rights. I did the same exact thing. My aunt had a whole argument with me about she's very pro-life and I'm very pro-choice because I'm a rape victim. And the first 2 times I was raped, I was not on birth control. If I had been pregnant, I don't know what I would have done. Especially if I'd still lived in Texas. And I think about that a lot. If I still lived in Texas, I'd be screwed. I would be stuck with my rapist baby. And I don't think that I would be able to live with myself. And so I just blocked her on everything. And I got messages from family members just berating me. Yeah, like, why would you? This is family. It's family first. It's family first always. And I'm like, no, it's not family first, actually. What it is you need to listen to me and my experiences, because I know what I'm talking about. And you're allowed to have your own opinions. You're allowed to be entitled to them. But what you're not allowed to do is tell me how to have my opinions. And especially as somebody who has dealt with rape, has, yeah, I mean, even now, if I got pregnant, I'd be ectopic. So, I'd be dead without an abortion.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I'm very much
Much pro-choice. I mean, I've had 2 miscarriages, and the whole argument of like anti-abortion is, oh, that's a baby. And when I think of like my miscarriages, they were the first trimester. It was a clump of cells. It wasn't a life yet. It didn't have a thought. It didn't have a soul. And I'm pretty sure it wasn't in pain when it exited my body, you know? And so it's like, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do in that? How can you tell me that, oh, God is all powerful and he made that life, and then that life was from me without my consent of knowing? I didn't like cause a miscarriage, it just happened. And it makes me so frustrated when they talk about those sorts of things.
Yeah. Well, they don't know it. It's not, because it's not about the life. It's not about God. It's not about, it's about control and patriarchy. It's all rooted there. Unfortunately. It's just kind of the way it is.
It is. So let me ask you this. Since you said
Said that 2 out of 5 of the rapes that you've experienced were those that you have dated, are you more selective with who you date now?
Yes. Both of the partners that I had that raped me, they were each unique experiences. The first one was this guy that I met on a whim. It was freshman year of college. I was not a dater in high school. I had 2 boyfriends my sophomore year and didn't date after that. So I meet this guy and he has this Australian accent and owns a moving company, and I was very mystified. We had a magical first date where it was dumping rain and we had Italian food and then ran through the rain, and I just kind of like, I think I was drawn to him because I was at a very dark time with my anxiety, and he was a person to cling on to. And I was not attracted to him at all. I did not want him. I didn't feel right when he touched me. And so I'm a kinky person. I'm very into masochism. I'm even into I think this also stems from sexual assault, but very into consensual non-consent, where there are safe words, there are measures in place to make sure that it doesn't turn into rape, stuff like that. And he knew that, and we had safe words established. Several. We also had movements so that if my hands were tied, I could still, if my mouth was covered, there are still ways. It gets to the point where he wants to have sex, and I told him I didn't want to, and he essentially pulled the but I'm horny card. And I was like, I don't want to. And so he starts taking off my clothes anyways, and I'm tied down, and I say the safe word to get him to stop, and he does. He stops for a minute and he looks at me and he goes, "You're taking the fun out of things. Don't use the safe word unless you're in pain or something." And I was like, "Bitch, I don't want to have sex. Stop." And he didn't use protection either, and I wasn't on birth control, and so it was just a whole mix of, oh shit, so now I might be pregnant, or the fact that I just didn't want to sleep with him in the first place, and I didn't even comprehend that he'd raped me until months later. We were together for probably another week after that, and then we broke up, and I was really okay with it. I was really fine with the breakup. But yeah, I mean, it was months later. I was living with a friend's parents, and I'd mentioned it, and my friend's parents look at me and they were like, "So this sounds a lot like a word that I know, that starts with R." And I just lost my shit that night. I called him, he didn't answer, so I left a voicemail saying, "You're a rapist. Fuck you." Yeah, the second one, we were together for 2 years and we broke up, thankfully, 9 months ago. He was really abusive the entire time. Usually was actually very cautious about consent during sex, but there was one time where my body was in excruciating pain because of how rough it was. I used the safe word. He stopped the first time and then asked if he could keep going, and I said yes, and then it got to the point where I was almost blacking out because of how badly I was in pain. But there had been times where he'd wanted to have sex and I didn't want to, and he would pull the well, I don't think that you're into me, and I don't think you're attracted to me, and it wasn't like a, hey, I just want to check, like, are we still good? Are you still attracted? Like, it wasn't like a question, it was like a pouting, like, I don't know if we should be together anymore, and you haven't, yes, exactly, and coercion. So I was scared to say no in general, but I did. I used this. I was almost blacking out because of how badly I was hurting, and I used the safe word again, and he didn't stop. He just said, "Let me finish," and just kept going. And so, and like, we were in a relationship for, I think it was over a year at that point, and I trusted him. He was really abusive the entire time, but like, at least in it sexually, I trusted him. And I think our whole relationship was built off of sex. So experiencing that, I went to the bathroom and just cried afterwards. And once again, didn't even realize it was rape until a little bit later. I was talking to one of his friends about it, actually, and had mentioned what happened. And his friend looked at me and said, "So he raped you?" And I was like, no. I'm not gonna say that. He didn't. And then it was months later where I was like, no, that's exactly what he did, because he stopped the first time. It wasn't like he didn't hear me. It wasn't like he didn't know that I was in pain. I said the safe word and I told him I was hurting, and he just didn't give a shit. Now I'm very selective. I mean, there are times where like I move very fast in relationships. I just always have been. I'm a very hopeless romantic, and like I'm seeing someone right now who I'm absolutely enamored with, but like, we've even talked about it. Like, if him and I are dating anytime soon, it's going to be a slow process and like a kind of loose, like I need to know that if things go south, I can get out. My ex and I, the second one who raped me, we lived together 4 months into the relationship. And that is something I will never do again. Definitely more of a learning experience. I'm a lot more cautious with who I let into my heart than who I let into my pussy now. Although, I mean, I'm safe about what I do. I'm very cautious about STD tests and, condoms and protection and, things like that. There's safety when it comes to that. But yeah, when it comes to relationships, I have to know. I do look for flags. I have a lot of green flags that I look for. Current person that I'm seeing does, like, every time asks me, "Do you want this?" I've had partners that have stopped in every set of the way, takes off my shirt, "Are you okay with this?" Or like just double checking. I made a face the other night while I was sleeping with my current, and I mean, he just stopped and he was like, "Are you okay?" Like, stuff like that. So I look out for things like that.
So then, going off of what you said about stuff with your partner, your current partner, my next question would be, so do you have a self-protection plan? Like, for example, do you own self-protection devices like pepper spray, a taser? Do you text your friends letting them know before you go on a date with the other person's information? Do you share your location? Do you have any protection plan in place if anything were to go awry?
Yeah, I mean, I have pepper spray. I feel like I have ways. My very, very last resort for anything is causing somebody physical harm. I'm not a violent person. There were times in the past where I thought about getting a gun, like a handgun, because especially, shortly after things happen, I'm going through the anger process and my brain is like, well, I'd rather shoot somebody than have to go through this again. But I think in reality, I couldn't. Even pepper spray, I think I would be too intimidated. I think right now, I'm just placing a lot of trust. I feel like despite having gone through this, I still have this place in my heart that is telling me that like human beings are inherently good, and I am trusting that the people that I am seeing the person that I'm seeing, that I trust that they understand my communication and that they respect it. I think my mode of protection right now would be, if they're not listening to me, I will straight up throw the word in there and be like, if you do this, you are raping me. Because if I had said that to my ex while he was doing things, I think he would have stopped immediately what he was doing. We probably wouldn't have been together after that, because a lot of men that I know hear the word sexual assault or rape directed at them, it scares them away immediately. Reputation is one of the biggest things I have encountered. And I think if any of the men that I had slept with had heard me say, "You're raping me," in the process of it, it would have ended anything. But unfortunately, I didn't have that in my brain at the time. Now I do.
So that being said, what is your opinion on pressing charges against someone who has assaulted you?
I think that if you can, then you should try. I have not ever, the only legal action I ever took was with my latest ex, who I was with for 2 years. And he didn't just rape me, he also threatened me with a gun and many other things. And so I got a protection order, and the rape, that did help me get away from him. That did help me get the protection order. But I was drugged. When I was drugged, I went to my campus's sexual assault prevention and help center and talked about it, and mentioned that I kind of wanted to go to the police, and they were like, "You already showered, and that a rape kit probably won't work, and even if it did, the police aren't going to do anything about it, so you probably shouldn't."
Yeah, that's a load of bullshit that they just told you.
Yep, they told me that, and they told me that if I went to the police, it would probably just further my trauma, and that the only thing that they would do is maybe make a note so that if somebody else came in about the guy, that they would have it on a list of oh, he's done this before, and then maybe it would do something. So yeah, that was the advice that I got, was essentially, don't do anything about it. Sorry you went through that. I think it was very damaging. I think that I could have potentially done something. But my school, I think that was their way of trying to keep their image clean.
Yeah, it's a way of
mitigating legal action, because if they have a student that has assaulted, raped, hurt another student, that school can be held liable for these things, especially if they gave you any advice over going to the police or not going to the police, and you did go to the police and you did report the school. You could sue the school for a lot of money. Yeah. So they're trying to prevent things like that. I'm really devastated that you went through that, and that you actually sought advice and you were given incorrect advice. For our listeners out there, if you have the courage to speak out about what has happened to you, if you have the courage to get help, please get help. And if you have the courage to, talk to the police, I implore you to do so, because once you do, you can get that person arrested and help prevent them from doing this action in the future. One of my best friends, she was assaulted by a guy she wasn't even seeing, but he assaulted her, and she pressed charges, and he's going to be going to jail. And she found out later that he had assaulted other women, and they never pressed charges, but because she pressed charges, because she sought the highest extent of the law, he's going to be going to jail for a very long time, because now all these other women are hearing about the case, and they're coming and piling on and saying, hey, this is my story too. Hey, he did this to me too. And I'm very proud of her for doing it's so brave, because it takes so much effort, to talk about these horrible things.
It's scary too, because it's especially with feminine, AFAB people, we are very taught that the law won't do anything, that nobody's going to listen to us. And sometimes, depending on where you're at and what your experience is, that can be the case. It's sometimes people will not listen, but sometimes they do. And And, you know, I didn't think that I was going to get the protection order against my ex. But thankfully I had some people in law enforcement that were on my side. And it turned out best case scenario. So there is a chance that somebody will listen to you, and there is a chance that something will be that something will be done and that justice will be had. But there is no chance if you don't put yourself out there. There's no chance if you don't try. And obviously, like, it's a really traumatic experience to have to continue to go through it and to continue to face this, to retell your story and stuff like that. It's really hard. I mean, even now, like, my chest is beating really hard, and, you know, I can feel, like, you know, heat in my face and stuff like that. It's never easy to talk about it. It's never easy to keep going through it in your head. But yeah, I mean, taking the risk, and if it doesn't put you at physical safety, I know with my first ex, the only reason I feel like I didn't speak out was because I didn't know what he would do to me. So you also, you know, make sure to take that into accountability. You know, definitely think about, you know, am I going to get hurt if I do this? But if you are safe and able to do this safely, then I definitely think that it's worth it to try.
Yeah, I would definitely say
It is very much worth it to try. And even if nothing comes of it, you can always say to yourself, hey, I tried, I did my best, and move forward. Because if you don't, some part of me really regrets not, you know, calling out my ex to the police. I mean, I was in another state at the time, and so I didn't know anything. I didn't know how to do it. But still, looking back on it, I'm like, I know his full name and I know his address. I could say something about it, because yeah, he also did film me. And you know, I blocked him, and like 6 months later he contacted me from a separate number with the film that he took of us, which I didn't know that it was happening. I didn't know it happened. And you know, that's revenge
Filming is
porn.
one of the most violating things. You know, I've made consensual sex tapes in the past. But like, knowing that somebody was recording you, especially in a day where digital footprint is so incredibly prominent. And like, for me, I'm a slightly public figure. And so, you know, to hear suddenly, you know, being recorded, yeah, it's damaging. And I'm so sorry that you had to experience that. It's not easy. I can't imagine being contacted about it randomly.
Yeah, it really threw me for a loop, because, you know, I hadn't thought of him for a while. I hadn't, and he just sent me the video, and I was like, you better delete that right now. And his response was, well, I like looking at it. It makes me happy to think of us still together in some universe. And I was like, you are deluded as hell. What? And so,
Batshit crazy.
yeah, it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And now, like, going forward, because, you know, I am a content creator. I have kind of been a content creator since I was 8 years old. I started my first YouTube channel. And I mean, now I'm just like, if that video got out, I would, I can't imagine. Have you seen anything with Colleen Ballinger and Trisha Paytas, with Colleen sending Trisha's nudes to minors and to other people, and having watch parties of her nudes to make fun of her?
Yep.
It is just
It's
horrifying.
just, it's so violating. Like, you send something, like, especially with nudes, like, if I send nudes to somebody, it is because I am putting my trust in you that this is for you. And like, definitely in high school, I had people come up to me and yeah, I've seen your tits. Like, great. So nothing I do is private. And yeah, like, thankfully, I mean, with the person who filmed me without my consent, I went to him afterwards, and I sent him a very long message where I was like, you filmed me without my consent, and I know that you were drunk, but this is not okay. And especially coming from a place of somebody who is a public figure, like, this can be really damaging. My audience on TikTok, a lot of them are like middle school, high schoolers. So I mean, there's a reason why I haven't started an OnlyFans. I do my occasional thirst trap, but you know, I talk about sex every so often, but I don't have an OnlyFans. I don't advertise myself in that way because I want to make sure that I'm creating a safe environment for minors who do watch me, because I can't weed out the minors. It's not like I can stop them from watching my channel. So yeah, I mean, imagine suddenly ItsJojoLouise has a sex tape out. Like, what am I going to be teaching young femme people? What kind of example am I setting there? Not only for them, but for me. I mean, I would be devastated because I don't want to be seen that way. I don't want to be seen as just an object that, and yeah, I mean, especially coming from a place where it was not consensual. I mean, and that night too, I consented on a whim after I found out that he was filming, because I didn't want to hurt his feelings. Which I feel like, for anybody who's listening to this, don't ever be afraid of hurting their feelings. If you're not okay with something, you are allowed to veto it. You are allowed to be rude about somebody. You are allowed to be rude to somebody who is taking advantage of your kindness, or somebody who is not listening to you say no. I feel like on a number of times I have let things go that I really shouldn't have, because I was just trying to be nice, trying to not hurt them. Even when I was talking to, you know, my old friend who did that, it was a lot of, I'm not trying to hurt you here. I'm not going to take this public or anything like that. It just hurts. And thankfully he was very receptive to it. Actually, he owned up to it and apologized, and it was a really good and healthy conversation about it. And he feels a lot of remorse, but yeah, I mean, he's not ever going to be able to take that back. That's something that he now has on his conscience. So you make sure people are listening to you and your boundaries. Setting boundaries is incredibly important.
Yes, it is. And it's so vital to have boundaries, and it's also very vital to have rules, because the difference between a boundary and a rule is a boundary can be crossed and there'll be consequences, but a rule, if it's crossed, there's going to be no contact rather. For example, for me, my boundary is, hey, you're not going to touch my chest. I despise having breasts. I'm going to get a breast reduction eventually once I have money. But I was a nanny to 4 boys, and I've told them several times, okay, don't touch my chest. Don't touch a girl's chest. Okay. Don't touch their breasts. It's without consent. Don't ever do that. And so that's a soft boundary. And then like a hard boundary would be like, don't touch my chest. You touch my chest, you get a consequence. That'd be a hard boundary. And then a rule is, if you touch my chest, I'm never going to talk to you again. We're going to have no contact. Nothing is going to happen between us. And so for me, it was really important to learn about these boundaries and how to establish them, because I was never taught that. I was never taught that as a child, except to have the boundary of, you're not allowed to hug boys front on. You're only allowed to have side hug with boys. That is the only boundary I ever was taught as, you know, a teenager. And I think it's so crucial nowadays to reparent ourselves and to say, oh, these are the boundaries that I have. These are the convictions that I have with my own body. And my boundary levels will be different for different people. Like with your partner, like, you know, be like, okay, I would appreciate if they hug me, right? But if it's someone that you don't know and you suddenly get a hug from them, you don't know them, then that's crossing a boundary. Like, I love when my partner hugs me from behind. It's so nice. But if I was to be hugged from behind by someone I don't know, or someone that I don't have that connection with, say like a friend or something like that, a guy friend, I would feel extremely uncomfortable, because we don't have that level of trust and communication. We don't have that foundation. And also it would be inappropriate in my point of view.
Yeah, it's very specific to different people. And I think a lot of people, like, that's something that should be very widely known, is my boundaries with one person are not going to be the same as my boundaries with another person. It depends on my comfort level. I have multiple guy best friends who I give full front hugs to, that I will hold to me, that I love. I have, friends that I cuddle with. I have, obviously a partner that I really care about, and he can touch me, and I will tell him if I don't want him to. And like, he probably won't know until afterwards, and that's okay with me. My boundary is that as long as you listen to me, if I say stop, then that's important. But I had like a roommate who he had a girlfriend, and I found him on Tinder, and I was automatically uncomfortable, and he would find any excuse to give me really lingering hugs and like hold my hand after a high five and stuff like that, just like weird things like that. So I had a very strict boundary of, I don't want to be touched like that, and he disrespected it, and I kicked him out. Like,
nice.
Yeah, I mean, it is very different. Boundaries are different for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
They're really important to maintain, because when you have a hard boundary and someone keeps crossing it and you allow them to keep crossing it, it can trigger something in your brain of, you're not comfortable with it, but you're okay with it. And I think that's another big thing with people who have endured sexual assault or sexual violence or sexual abuse. If it's happening consistently and you have no way of making it stop, it becomes normal. And
it's almost like we feel like we can't do anything about it because we weren't able to in the past. And so it's better to just accept it and be okay with it than to go through that mentally again.
Yeah. And I just want to say to the listeners out there, help is always available. If you don't feel comfortable, talking about it with people that you know personally, we have a Discord server where you can talk about literally anything anonymously, and you can get advice and resources for the things that you're going through, because you deserve to be helped and you are worth the effort it takes to get better.
And I would love to join the Discord too. I can be a resource as well for helplines. I mean, going through things like this can put you in really dark places, and it is much better to, like, you're never a burden. I feel like a lot of the time after going through stuff like this, especially with the one that was more recent, I mean, it was like 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I felt like I couldn't talk to anybody because I was so scared that I was gonna bring my friends into it with me. But like, if you don't want to bring your friends into it, there are helplines available. There are professionals that you can talk to. There's outlets. I mean, there's the Discord that you're talking about. Sometimes it's better to just dump it on a stranger who, can't internalize it. But as long as you are able to have that healthy outlet, and you're just not alone. I think that that's important to know too, is you are not the only person who's experiencing this. And while that sucks, it can mean that you have empathy coming from every direction. We stand in solidarity. This is a really rough thing to face.
How can our society change to further prevent sexual assault?
I think that it starts young. I think it's up to authority figures, people that kids look up to really push the agenda of respecting consent, of communication in general. I mean, even when it comes to things that aren't sexual, I feel like a lot of people just lack communication skills, and especially in this era of, everything's online. One of the most important things that you could ever learn is how to properly communicate, and how to listen to somebody else's communication without taking it as an attack, without taking it as if you have a partner that says, like, hey, I need you to stop, that's not them attacking you. That's not them claiming that you're a rapist immediately. It's not until after you don't listen. It's not until after you hear that no and disregard it that it turns into that rape. It's just all about making sure to be communicative, to listen, and be receptive to communication. And if we can teach our youth that from a young age, especially during those crucial like pubescent times where people are going through puberty, people are starting to feel these sexual urges. Normalizing sex too as well, I think, can do a huge number, not just for the to prevent the rapist from raping, but also from to help people on the other end of that understand what's happening and help being able to stop it. Because I think the first several times it happened to me, I was so unfamiliar with sex because it was so taboo and something that I was so taught was filthy, that I felt filthy and I didn't want to tell people. I didn't want to get help. I didn't want to put a stop to it because I was so ashamed. So normalizing, this is something that happens. Sex is a completely normal thing. Here's how to do it safely. I think sex education needs a huge reform everywhere, especially in Texas. I mean, my sex ed was don't have sex, you'll die. And don't look at perfume ads, they'll make you want to have sex. It was really, really weird. And so, yeah, I mean, sex ed reform, teaching kids communication skills, all of those things are vital to lowering this statistic.
Yeah, it definitely is. Let me ask you this question, and sometimes it's a
Very hard question, especially for me. But are you able to forgive the people that have abused you?
It depends. It depends on the person. With the last person I experienced it with, he was a really close friend of mine before it happened. I don't think I could ever be friends with him the way I was. But when I had the conversation, when I reached out to him and said, hey, this is what I'm experiencing, and like even thinking about it now, like it's starting to, like, I can feel it in my chest, because it's still very fresh. And I told him, I said, I saw you the other night at this venue, and I asked you to dance because I wanted to be okay with everything that happened, but I wasn't. I had a panic attack right afterwards. And, I talked to him about it, and his response was literally, oh my God, Joe, I am so sorry. I was so drunk and I had never intended to cause you that kind of pain. And like, I will fix this behavior immediately. This will never happen again. And my alcohol consumption contributed to that. And that's clearly something that I need to fix. And so, it was a very positive, and like, he took it extremely well. And I think that that's what I want to hear, like if I brought that to somebody, that was the best case scenario, is a really heartfelt and genuine apology. There was no blaming on me. There was no denial. It was all, I cannot believe that I made you feel that way. I never intended to do that. And I'm so sorry that I did. And I will fix that behavior. Him, he's already forgiven. Not forgotten. He can never take back what he did, but I don't think he's a bad person. And I don't want to put a rapist label on him or anything. I think that he is a really good person who has an alcohol problem. There's also people like my ex who it was deny, you're crazy. And I can't ever forgive him. I can't forgive the person who drugged me. I feel like there's a lot of there's a lot of things that are still open and like not resolved. I never got closure from like my ex, the Australian one, the first person I was in a relationship. I can't forgive someone who directly ignored my safe word and told me that I was taking the fun out of things because I didn't want to have sex. I can forgive a drunken mistake where communication was lost and an apology. I can't forgive you're taking the fun out of things.
Yeah, definitely. Let me ask you, take a little break for a second. How are you feeling right now?
I'm good. It's a heavy topic, and I'm definitely kind of a little bit in emotional distress. I feel like it's going to be a hard I'm going to have a little bit of a rough time tonight, just because it is it's not like it's an easy topic. It's still something that is fresh on my mind. Okay. Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty well. I took a Xanax. So
Yeah.
I before the episode I had to do some, meditation, some self preparation for it because it is a very difficult topic. But I think
Yeah.
it's incredibly important to discuss, especially when we're trying to destigmatize topics like this.
Yeah.
Because
I think people need to know that they're okay to share their stories. Because I
yes.
think, I mean, even with my close friends, when I bring up rape, you just get silence and like dead stares back. Like
Yeah.
nobody knows what to say. Nobody. You almost get the pity looks. The
Yeah.
anxious. I feel like, while I appreciate condolences, sometimes the worst thing to hear is "I'm sorry" because it makes me feel like I already am a victim. I don't want to feel like the victim. I don't want to have to keep sitting here and being like, "Oh, woe is me." Because I'm not the only person who has faced this. It's not like I'm special or unique because I've been through this. It just feels like it's a problem that this society deals with.
Yeah.
I mean,
definitely we need to talk about these things. The only way to get rid of that victim mentality mindset is to take hold of it. Be like, this is what has happened to me. Because there's a difference between being a victim and then victimizing yourself. And I think so many, survivors are construed as victimizing themselves because they're talking about it. And that's just so false in so many ways.
The name of your podcast is, the trauma dump. And I hate the word trauma dumping because it's only used in a negative context. And it feels like there are instances where if you talk to people, you do need to ask, hey, are you okay with hearing this? Hey, before I talk to my friends about anything that I'm struggling with, I always have hey, are you okay to hear this right now? It's going to be a difficult listen. It's probably going to be draining.
Yeah.
But also to sit and say, oh, you're trauma dumping on me. Sometimes that's just my way of trying to process I didn't realize that I was raped until I outwardly processed it to another person. And not everybody has access to professionals that can listen. So sometimes you just need to get it out. And yes, you should check. But
it's important.
Part of this top, is it healthy to trauma dump? Yeah, sometimes it is, as long as you ask the other person for their consent to dump that on them. I think that, sometimes it's the only way, and it does need to be talked about, because the only way to destigmatize trauma and to get out of that victim mindset that people have, that, oh, woe is you, the pity, is to normalize people go through shit like this. And it doesn't mean that we are weak or less than. It also doesn't mean that we need to be glorified. It just means that we are human beings that have gone through really difficult shit.
Amen. I hate to say amen, but that's all it could come out, because you're preaching right now. That's so true. I mean, the whole reason I call it the Trauma Dump Podcast, because number one, it's catchy as hell. It gets your attention, because a lot of people are like, they use such a negative connotation of trauma dumping. But number two, this is what we need to do. This is how we purge ourselves from what's going on. And then once you've purged, you can reflect, acknowledge, and move forward. I mean, when I was freshman in college and I was in a very controlling household, my mother called me Cinderella for a reason, because from the age of 10 upwards, I did all the cooking, all the cleaning, everything for the entire family. And it's not a small family. I did everything because my mom decided that she wanted to have a job. Bless her. Go ahead, have a job, but you shouldn't parentify your 10-year-old girl. It was horrible. And so when I went off to college and I finally had freedom and the ability to be myself and pursue the things that I wanted to do, I was so harassed by my mother, because she was like, oh, I have to be a mom again. I have to do all these things, like all these unseen tasks that normally they're not, like, you don't recognize that they're done until they're not being done, like the dishes, like sweeping the floor.
Normalize
dusting.
not using your kids for physical labor, because I also experienced I called myself Cinderella growing up, oddly enough, so very similar. I was like, I mean, growing up, my dad and it wasn't even my dad. My dad was gone a lot, but my stepmom hated me.
Mm.
And she would literally, I mean, you know how Texas heat is. Summers in Texas, she'd lock me outside the house, shut all the blinds, and force me to do yard work for 12 hours without food, without water. I wasn't allowed to use the bathroom.
Wow.
And she'd like cut my hair off and make me wear embarrassing clothes on purpose. And I called myself Cinderella because, yeah, I mean, parents with that don't want to deal with being parents just use the kids for physical labor, and that's abuse. That
Yeah.
is abusive.
It is abuse, and it's another episode that I want to talk about is like childhood trauma and child abuse, because it's something that a lot of us don't recognize we went through until we're told we went through it. When you start to resonate with these types of things, there's a YouTuber, he's a psychiatrist on YouTube. His name is Patrick Teagan. I love his videos with all my heart, and he just talks all about childhood trauma, all these aspects of childhood trauma. It's his specialty. And I didn't really recognize I had childhood trauma. So I started watching his videos of being like, oh my gosh, I was so extremely parentified. And how I dealt with, my sexual assault was that, I had to deal with it all on my own. I had to figure it out all on my own because I was never a child that could speak to my family members about anything that was going on. I was never allowed to ask for help. I was never allowed to be a kid. And so when this traumatic thing happened to me, you don't know what to do. A lot of the times you don't know what to do, because even in our media, even in movies, even in TV shows, they tell these people that are going through these hard things, oh, you're being a burden. I don't want to hear that. That's all negative. You need to be positive. You need to be good. And so
It's hard, especially if you have a personality. Like, I think one of the top things I hear all the time is, Joe, you're so nice. You're always so happy. You always have a smile on your face. And it makes it really, really hard to talk about pain because like you don't want to bring it down. And like, yeah, I mean, in anything, it's always, you want to keep the vibe happy. You want to make sure that everybody is happy around you. And sometimes it is so draining to keep a smile on your face when you are fighting so many internal battles of, oh, I went through this, I'm going through this, and dealing with childhood trauma. I have very severe PTSD from multiple different things. And like, it's really, really hard some days. Like some days I can't get out of bed because it's flashbacks.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Yeah. I resonate with that pretty heavily.
And I'm really sorry that you had to deal with that too. It's hard, but I'm glad that we're able to talk about it.
Yeah, I'm really glad to have someone to talk about it openly with. And, it's something that most most women go through, and a lot of men go through it as well.
Not to mention, I mean, like queer, non-binary, trans people. I mean, sexual assault amongst the non-binary and trans community as well. Coming from cis people, like, God, I can't imagine.
Yeah. I know one of my guy friends, he's a very attractive man, and he got the attention of guys and girls all the time, and he's asexual. He's very attractive person. He just doesn't find attraction to anyone. He's just like chilling. He's vibing out here. And he got heavily pursued by another guy, and he thought, oh, this is just my friend. This is just my guy friend. This is just someone who wants to hang out with me. They say that they love me. They say they want to hang out. And that guy friend knew that he was asexual because he told him. He was like, oh no, I can change you. I can change you. I can, like, you just haven't ever had sex in a really good way, and I can make you feel really good. And it was so much coercion. And, eventually he was raped. He was assaulted by this other guy. And he told me about it.
It's weird with Ace and Arrow people, the the societal thing where people think there's something wrong with them.
Yeah.
Somehow. I have a friend who I was hooking up with for a while who's aromantic.
Mhm.
And I mentioned that to a friend. I was like, yes, I'm sleeping with this person and it's just physical. And he was like, not feelings for him. And I was like, no, he's aromantic. And the first thing they said was, oh my God, who did him wrong? I'm like, some people just don't experience that. Some people don't have that kind of attraction. It doesn't mean that they went through something or that there's something wrong with them. It just means that they said that they're aro. He said that he's aromantic. Therefore, I'm not forming any kind of connection to him because he doesn't want that. And it's my job as a sexual partner to respect that.
Definitely, definitely. Man, I really appreciate having all these conversations with you about all this, sexual assault, sexual trauma. It's very healing to talk to you about it, for me. And I really appreciate you. I really appreciate your insight and all the things that you've gone through. It's very difficult to go through all these things, but you've handled it with such grace, such empathy, such compassion and understanding. And I would love to have you on another episode going forward.
Yeah, I would love that. I have a lot
Yeah.
to talk about. I know you mentioned you wanted to do a childhood trauma one, and if you need another person there, I'm game. I have a lot of experiences, and very interested in continuing the conversation.
Of course. Thank you so much for being a part of this episode. I mean, I'm still figuring it out, but I'm so glad that I've had you on. I'm so appreciative, and I'm so proud of you for sharing your experiences. And you
Right back
deserve,
at you.
you deserve to take a hot bath and chill out. Maybe smoke something, like take a breather.
Have a little drinky poo.
Have a little drinky drink.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, and right back at you. Thank you for being willing to share your experiences with me and for feeling safe enough to be vulnerable with me. I'm very honored that you asked me to be here, and I'd be more than happy to do it again. And I hope that there are some people out there that are able to feel less alone after hearing this, and also feel like they can have somebody to talk to, find resources, and maybe take some action.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right.
We'll see you later.
You.
Bye.